Hey, I'm going to walk you through the coding basics, which is part of the Ladder Learning Hell Week, or the first 2 weeks of your training Ladder. And I'm going to cover off a few different coding languages, right? So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, SQL. Maybe you've heard of these things, but don't know what they do. I'm just going to walk you through what they do. So not so you will learn exactly how to code from this this training session, but really just so you understand what's going on, what's possible, and you can talk to developers much more confidently, and then maybe start to pick some things up yourself. So first of all, the web, pretty much all of our marketing we do is digital, so this is important. What is a URL? So the different parts of the URL. So this HTTPS or HTTP part, this bit, that's the protocol. Then you have the subdomain, www, or it could be join.example.com, signup.example.com, and then we have example.com. So example is the domain, and then .com is the TLD, the top level domain, and then we have say this is a folder on the website, and this is a file on the website, right? So, what does this mean? So, just like your computer, when you buy a domain name and then you host, a website on that domain name, you're basically putting a computer, but like out there on the cloud, right? So whenever someone goes to your website, they're actually visiting a computer, right? So just like a computer, you can have files. So this is / landing page / a HTML. That means that the a.html file is in this folder, this landing folder, right? And all of the folders are sitting on the domain, but specifically they're sitting on the subdomain. So if the domain was an address, so your address is 123 Park Avenue, the subdomain is equivalent to, say, like the floor number in the building, right? Some buildings might have just one floor, and maybe they just use www or remove this part entirely. But you can have multiple floors, and each one of these are separated. So your client can go and create a new one. They can say, you can tell them, hey, can you create a subdomain, which is, instead of www.example.com, you can have signup.example.com. So that's how Unbounce works, for example. And each floor is its own separate code base. So anything that's on www. Does not really talk directly to anything that's on join. They might look the same. For the consumer, it might look the same, but there's no connection whatsoever. So you can have WordPress installed at blog.ladder.io like we do, but you can have a completely different code base based on different coding language entirely on www.ladder.io. So HTML, what is HTML? This is really the bare bones of a web page. So you have two sections. This is the head and the body, and this is a really simple web page. But you can actually save this in a file and then open it on your browser, and it would work. And what it would show, the title, that's what goes up here in the tab. That's what shows up there. So this is useful for SEO, for example. You can also have the description here, but then the body, this is what the user actually sees. So the head is, what Google sees, what loads all the different scripts and stuff. I'll show you that in a second. But the body is really what what you have in the actual text of the web page. Right? So H1, this is header 1. So this would be the main title of the page. Header. This is the main heading. This is what an image looks like. So it's image source equals smiley gif. So this is where the image is saved on the website at /smileygif.com or smiley.gif. And then alt text is the text you get when you hover over the image. This is also used for SEO. Because Google obviously can't see what's in the image, so they rely on what text you put here. P is just paragraph, and with these tags you can see they follow a similar pattern. So the name of the tag, that's the opening tag, and then they have a backslash here to close the tag. Same here, h1 and then a backslash h1. So that's how you see what's in a tag. A tag is in the body if it's indented in like this. So it doesn't have to be like that. It could be in here. That doesn't really matter to the computer, but just to make it more human readable, this is the convention for what people use. They indent it, so you can see that the h1 is in the body. This title is in the head. Meta tags. So this is useful for SEO. So these are different tags you can add into the head that tells Facebook, Google, what types of content you want to show. So we talked about the title. That's what shows up in the tab here. Description. That's what shows up when you do a Google search and you have the description on the on the search results page. And then these tags, these are called Open Graph tags, OG. These are for Facebook and other social networks. So if, for example, you don't want them to auto-select what text goes into the box when someone shares your page, you can actually force them, or at least suggest to them that the title when someone shares should be this, right? So you could make the title when someone shares different to the title that you use on SEO, for example, which is good practice. Description as well. Social has its own description, so you might want to rewrite this to make it more useful to show on Facebook, for example. And then you can even use your own image, so you can resize the image specifically for for Instagram or whatever you need to do. Or pick an image that makes more sense for social versus the main image that's on the website. Image link. So this is what it looks like when you link an image. So what this means is you have your image just like we had before, smiley GIF, but it's inside of an A. A is the A tag is a link tag. So the way an A works is it has an attribute here, href, and this is the URL that you're linking to. Right. So what this is going to do is show an image, and then if you click on it, it's going to take you to example.com. CSS. So HTML websites would be really boring if we didn't have CSS. CSS is what styles the website. It makes it look good, right? This slides document would be literally just a title, coding basics, and then lots of text. If we didn't have CSS, CSS is the presentation, the format, the colors, the fonts, everything, right? So here you have your HTML like we had before, but we've put in a style tag, and we basically said that P, so this is the paragraph, should have a font family of Times New Roman, and then if we don't have that, then Georgia, then serif, right? So what this is going to do is style this P tag, or every P tag actually on the page, and it's going to make it a Times New Roman font. It's the same basic structure. You have this time the h1 in curly brackets, and we've got multiple attributes. So we're saying that we want the h1 to be this color, which is a hex code, and we want the font size to be 150%. So we want it to be much bigger than it currently is. You can actually kind of mess around with these in your own website, so you can kind of change them through the Chrome dev tools, which there's another training session on in Growth TV. CSS positioning. So how do we say that this box goes here, this box goes here, there's this much space in between? Well, you do all that with margin. So margin is basically the top margin, right, bottom and left, I believe it goes. Or you could say margin left, margin right, I think as well. But basically you can tell it how much to space the h1 out from the rest of the elements. We looked at putting a style tag just in line with the code, but typically most good developers, they want to separate these different things. They want to separate the form from the function, so they put all of the CSS rules in the head, like in a separate style sheet, right? So this is what a style sheet link looks like. Now, the benefit of doing this is that none of your text has to change, but you can have a completely new website redesign with the same text, literally just by changing this file, right? So that's one of the big tenets of coding is keeping concerns modular and keeping them separate, so that if you want to do a website redesign, all you have to do is rewrite the CSS. You don't have to change any of the text. That makes it a lot easier. Now, JavaScript is really where it gets interesting. HTML and CSS, not really coding languages, to be honest. They're pretty basic. It's more of a way to mark up text to make it usable. And one of the reasons why you want to mark up the text is so you can use JavaScript to make changes if you need to. Right? So most websites use a lot of JavaScript to make changes to the website. Anything that you see on a page that's happening dynamically, meaning you're not loading a new page when you click on that link, or when you add to cart, for example, if the product pops up in the top right corner as added to cart without the page reloading, then that's JavaScript at work. And JavaScript is the engine for browsers. Like, it's all web development, all front end web development is done via JavaScript. So JavaScript can manipulate different things on the page. So what we're doing here is, we have a p tag, paragraph tag. We've given it an ID. So an ID is basically, we're saying that this is unique on the page, and we're going to call this demo. And that allows you to make changes with JavaScript. So we can say document get element by ID demo dot inner HTML. So this is kind of taking whatever is inside this element and then changing it to hello JavaScript. So if you ran that code, it would change demo text to hello JavaScript. jQuery is just a simpler way of doing it. So you see here we have document dot get element dot ID blah blah blah. That's a bit long and confusing. You might not remember all that stuff. jQuery is a library where they've made it a bit more human readable to make these changes a bit more simple. So you can just select an element with a $sign and then have like text instead of inner HTML. Just a note here, jQuery will need to be installed on the website, which means putting a line of JavaScript on in the header. But most websites actually already have it. So selectors. So this is, for example, another way to make changes. So for example, we could say, we've given this a class of paragraph. So a class is like an ID, but you can apply it to multiple things. So these different slides here in this document might have a class of slide. So if you wanted to make change to all the slides and make them all blue or whatever you want to do, you could use this. So a hashtag is used to denote an ID. A dot is used to denote a class, and then we can change this text to goodbye JavaScript. And it would actually, if we had multiple of these, it would change the text for all of them. So this, for example, we would see, this would also change to goodbye JavaScript. Append, so this is allowing us to add new elements to the page. So what we're doing here is we create a variable called para. Variable is just a box to stuff some information in, and the information we stuffed in was this text, which is class equals paragraph. This is a paragraph. Note that we used single quotes on the outside because we needed to use double quotes on the inside. It's going to mess up if you use double quotes in both places or single quotes in both places. This is now, this para is going to then get appended to this demo. So that means it's going to go in just next to it, so below it. So you would see this first, and then you would see this. So this is how you, like if you were running a Google Optimize test, for example, this is how you can add new text or add new sections to the website. You can also change CSS with jQuery, so you can get the the ID and then change the color. So you can make this red, for example, and font size 150%. You can hide elements. So this is how most Google Optimized tests work, or at least the easy ones. It's very, very simple to hide an element, actually. So whenever you're doing an A/B test, maybe you're like, oh, I want to test a product recommendation at the bottom of each product page. It would be very, very hard in Google Optimized to like insert the product recommendations because it's going to require a lot of calls to the server and all sorts of crazy things. Very, very hard for our dev team to do. But if you get the client to put it on the page by default, then it's very easy to hide it as part of the test. So we can say, put the product recommendations on the page, and then we can hide them 50% of the time and see whether showing them drives performance or not. Right? So this is just .hide, very simple. On-click events. So this is, for example, if you need to trigger some conversion tracking when someone clicks on a button. This is, what Alex Kripsky is doing, 90% of the time, right? So finding the element that you want to track, adding .click, data layer push. So this is the Google Tag Manager data layer. It's called data layer, and then we're pushing this information into it. And this in curly brackets is just a dictionary. So it's saying, it could have multiple attributes, but this is just saying, fire the event, hello JavaScript, right? And this could be whatever you want within the quotes here. But this is going to show up as an event. Now in Google Tag Manager, you can say, whenever this event is fired, that's the trigger, and now I can fire all my tags as needed. But you don't have to just stick to the event name. You can put a bunch of different things in there. So for example, if you had if you wanted to put the text in here, so maybe you're A/B testing buy now versus order now and seeing which one worked best. In analytics, you can actually push this text or read it from the page and then push that into Google Tag Manager and by extension into Google Analytics as well. So the way you would do that is you want to find the buy button, and then you just want to get the value, right? So that's the text in between, or you could use text here, whatever. Then you want to, this is just the same as we had before, the data layer push, but just a bit extended out on multiple lines. So you can see it's still the curly brackets, but we've got multiple lines here. So we've got text, we want that to be text. So this is a custom attribute. And then we put a comma. It's very important when you're doing this. You need to have a comma behind each one, apart from the last one. Otherwise it won't work. And then you're pushing a purchase event, right? So when someone clicks on the buy button, now it's going to say in your event, you're going to be able to say, okay, they clicked on buy now or subscribe now or order now or whatever text that button had. Pulling other attributes from the page. So say, for example, you wanted to get like what URLs are people clicking off the website from, right? So you have your image smiley and it's linked through to example.com. Well, this is getting the href, so it's saying find the pick element. This is ID pick. The attribute is href, so it's pulling this attribute and then pushing that into Google Tag Manager. You can pull child attributes. So if, for example, you wanted to get the source, you could, and maybe this doesn't have an ID, right? So it's hard to get it. You could get this first, and then get the child of the A, which is this, right? So we're basically getting hashtag pick and then the space and then image. So they're saying look for the image that's within the ID pick, and then we're pulling the source. Pulling price. So if you have the price somewhere on the page, anything that's on the page is accessible for code. So you can pull the price. We've got the price value here, and then we're pushing that. That would allow you to, for example, push actual revenue into your Facebook conversion event, or to set up e-commerce tracking, for example. You can also fire an element. This is my favorite one. If something exists, so on every page you could run the script, and that if something with the ID of price exists, then you must have quoted the user, right? So you can actually push an event that says, okay, if price is not undefined, as in, if it runs this and there is no price, it's going to be undefined, right? So if it's not undefined, so meaning it exists, then push the event quote. So, you can use this pretty extensively for, lots of hacks and workarounds if you need to, in order to track whether a certain element is on the page. You could also use this, if pop-up shows up, all sorts of things. You can replace characters pretty easily. So here we have this $, which kind of screws up our numbers. So we want to remove it. So in this case, we're saying price.replace $, with nothing, and then pushing it. Loops. So this is a really cool one, especially if you're e-commerce. It might be useful to know how many products are on the page. So if someone searches for black bags, how many black bags did you show them? If each of those black bags has the same class, you can actually just loop through them and count them. So that could be one way to kind of push the inventory and see, when someone searches black bags, we're showing 15 black bags. When someone searches red bags, we're only showing 1. Maybe that's why the conversion rate is down. And the way that this works is it's called a for loop, and this type of concept is really popular in all programming languages. But what it means is create a variable called I and set it to 0. And then while I is below paragraph's length, as in, here we've pulled all the paragraphs and it has a length because it has, it counts up from 0 for each of these. So the length would be, say, 3. Then if I is below 3, then keep running this. And every time you run this, we're increasing p count by 1, which is this variable we started at 0. And then this is saying every time you run the for loop, then increment I by 1, right? So plus plus. What this will do is, p count will start at 0. It will find the first one. It will add 1 to p count, and paragraph's length will still be bigger than I. But paragraphs, but then I is going to increase by 1. Going to run it again. I is going to increase by 1. It's going to run it again, and then it's going to stop because then it won't be lower, right? So you'll get the full 3 paragraphs and be able to push that into Tag Manager. Storing information in a cookie. So this is really popular trick for tracking and hidden form fields, for example. But this is an example where we could store the price in a cookie, and you don't have to worry about all of this stuff. To be honest, the cool thing about coding is you can just copy and paste these scripts. Like I think I found it from here, this URL, but actually it's like you can copy and paste this stuff and then just edit the things you want. So I want to get the cookie value. I want that to be the price value. The cookie name, I want it to be called price. But like all of this stuff, I just copied and pasted, right? So I don't even know necessarily what it does, but I tested it and it works. So it's probably good enough to hack something together for now. Header scripts. So I mentioned before, typically, just like the CSS stuff, you wouldn't put all these scripts like on the page. You would put them into a script in the head. And that's basically what Tag Manager is doing for you as well. It's a script in the head, and it's serving all of your other scripts as needed based on certain rules. Json. So this is important to know because this is the format that a lot of data comes in. This is called JavaScript object notation. So it's saying here's an object. It has some variables. So it's called name is John, age is 30, cars. So cars is also another object underneath. And you can have nested objects like this, and that's how kind of data is stored a lot of the times. Or when you connect into an API, this is the format that it comes out in. So if I wanted the name of this object, it could give me back John because I put .name, or if I put .cars, .car2, it's going to tell me what the second car is. So it's going to say cars. It's going to return this list of different cars, and then car2 is BMW. One really cool thing that I recommend you should do is just actually look at this code on websites. So if you right click and go to view page source, you can actually see all of this text, see what elements are what, like you can look at your button and see what the ID is, so you can use that in your tracking. It's all open to you, and that's one of the joys of the web is you can learn by just seeing other people's code. Network requests is also important. So one thing to remember here is that this is just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If I want to get any information from a database, I have to make a request, right? So, for example, this is a Google Analytics request. This is actually kind of sending to Google Analytics database, like who I am as a user, right? So if you want to see if Google Analytics is working, you can actually see this and see what information is being sent. So I can see my user ID, I can see it's sending a page view. If it was a different event, like when I click on a button, it would show something different. So you can snoop on this stuff and see where your data is being sent. It's pretty interesting. JavaScript console is really useful because it's like a playground for coding. You can actually write code and it changes elements on the page. So you could write 100% of your Google optimized tests, you could write in console without even downloading Google Optimize or having access. And if you want to add tracking and stuff, especially if it's really custom tracking, like I was showing you before, you can actually experiment with it in here and see if you grab the right element, see what comes up. So this is, for example, I'm trying to get the document.referrer, which is what was the website I was on before I landed here. And I can just type in document.referrer and it's giving me back blog.ladder.io, right, which is correct. So you can play around a lot in here, and that's how I really learned a lot of this stuff. Cookies, so you can see what information is stored about you, which services are storing that information. The most important ones to look out for are like Google Analytics, but a lot of websites, like particularly if you're storing cookies, like for example, we store the UTM campaign content, etc., on the user level, and so you can use that in tracking if we need to. HubSpot is storing this big ID for us, so you can just see what's on here and what domain is storing it. And all of these values should be accessible if it's your domain. So if it's a ladder.io cookie, you should be able to read it. I think you can also read second-party and third-party cookies as well, but there are some restrictions. So packages. One thing to remember about coding is nobody has memorized all of the ways of writing code. We almost always Google stuff and then see what other people have written. And one really great thing that developers do a lot of is they share their work very openly. So this, for example, is a package that someone has written, and it'll probably be thousands of lines of code. Someone has written this package to make it easy for you to add, drag and drop to your website, right? So thinking, not being experienced with development, I would think adding drag and drop would be extremely complicated. And actually, it could be as simple as these, few lines of code. Oversimplifying it, but you can add, because this developer has written all this code for us and then released it for free. We can just add drag and drop, and then target something and make it drag and droppable, right? So yeah, really, really cool. And developers are constantly trying to work their way out of a job. One way to check whether something is doable or easy, if you're asking a developer, is to just look for yourself, whether there's a package or a library that already does it, or search for a tutorial, and the tutorials would probably be written by the person who made the package, right? So, some things that you're asking a developer are extremely hard, because there's no existing package, right? Some things you're asking are really, really easy, because even if they seem very difficult, right? So it's always about figuring this out. And this is one of my favorite cartoons. It's XKCD, but it just kind of shows the naivety here. So this person is non-technical and they're asking a developer for some work, and they don't realize how ridiculous the thing is they're asking. So they're saying, I want an app that takes a photo and checks whether you're in a national park. So that's really easy, because all of the data for national parks is open source, right? And your phone gives you a location, so you can just match them. That's really, really easy to do, even though it sounds like wizardry. This is something that even I could code. And if you wanted to check whether the photo is of a bird, you'll need a research team and 5 years, right? So it seems like checking whether the photo is of a bird should be as easy as looking up whether you're in a national park, but it's light years ahead in terms of complexity. Computers are very, very bad at recognizing what's in a photo, to the point where Google has spent probably hundreds of millions at this point on trying to figure these things out using machine learning. And now actually machine learning is catching up and starting to get a little bit easier, because these developers, even the ones that Google hired, are putting this code out there open source for free. So there is a really great open source machine learning package you can use now that you could train on whether the photo is of a bird. So this is even out of date. Actually, you can get something like 90% accuracy using just these free libraries. So it moves along really, really quickly, and just double check. Like, you can cause a lot of undue stress on a developer by asking them to do something that you think is simple, but actually for computers is really hard. I talked a little bit earlier about front-end development and JavaScript, HTML, CSS, how that's in the browser. So what is the server? So that's front-end, that's the client side. So that's, when you're on your computer, what are you interacting with? Well, when you make a request, so I showed you the Google Analytics request, it's going through the internet, it's connecting to a server, and the server is another computer somewhere. So it might be some space in a server in a big, cloud farm, or it could be some servers that someone has in their basement. It doesn't really matter, but functionally it's the same. The server is running what's called backend code, and backend code is almost always related to data. So, for example, if you want to do a search on Amazon, it's JavaScript that sends that search query to through the internet to Amazon servers, but there are millions and millions of lines of code on the Amazon side across probably multiple servers that handle that search query. So and that could all be in different languages. It doesn't have to be JavaScript, although it is possible to write JavaScript on the server side too. So it could be Python, Ruby on Rails, it could be C, C#, like all these different programming languages you talk about, or you hear about, they're almost all used for this server side, and they can generate web pages. For example, you have web frameworks like Ruby on Rails or Django for Python that would generate the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that's just the front end. That's just what the user sees. All of the really complex stuff is happening back here on the server. That's where you're storing millions of rows of data on the users. That's where you're doing complex algorithms to determine which product someone is likely to buy next. The machine learning is happening on the server. So just understand the difference between these two. Typically different jobs entirely, different engineering teams even. So one way to get data out of a database on the server is to use SQL. So it's called structured query language. And this is how it looks. So this is kind of old school looking, but you want to select the star as all. So select star, select all from this table, right? So if you think about this, as maybe as an Excel spreadsheet, GA is the name of the spreadsheet, and then source, medium, report is one of the tabs, and it's going to give you all the columns and rows in that tab, right? So think about it that way. This is if you want to select just two columns from that tab. This would just be date and source instead of selecting everything. This is if you want to rename it. So I want to select the source, but I want to call it marketing source in my report. And then you're pulling it from. This is a limit. So you're saying just pull the first 100 rows, for example. Like if maybe you have 100 million rows and it would crash your computer to pull everything. So you can just limit right here. Using a where statement. So this is if you want to do a bit more of a search. So select all from this where source equals Google. So this would be taking your GA data and then filtering just for Google. You could select all where it's not Google, for example, if you want to filter out Google and see what other channels are driving traffic for you. Or you could even do things like, where sessions are more than or equal to 1,000. So these are just like the filters in Excel as well. Operators, so this would be like order by sessions descending. This would be, tell me where it's like the word face percentage, right? So the percentage is like a fuzzy lookup. So, this would find, Facebook or face mash or, face, m.facebook.com or whatever, it'd find a bit of a fuzzier match. This is if you want to pull multiple, so you can say where medium is in this list. So it would find medium equals CPC, medium equals CPC lowercase, medium equals paid ads, whatever. You could keep adding to this list. And if the source is like Facebook, right? Aggregate functions, so it's getting a little bit more complicated now. So this is, you could sum up the sessions. So if I wanted to find out how much sessions I had in this table from Google, I could do this sum. If I wanted to count the number of dates, so how many days worth of data do I have for Google, that's how I do this. This is finding the day with the smallest sessions, or how many, what was the lowest amount of sessions I had in the row. What was the smallest GA source. That could be done this way. You could also find the max sessions as well. And this is where it gets really interesting, is group by. So this is kind of like a pivot table where you could say, show me the sum of the sessions, but I want it grouped by medium and source. So this is going to show, it's like, say maybe you had a database with a row for every day. This is group by is then aggregating that, removing the date column, and putting it by medium and by source. So you see the total sessions by medium and source, and then this would be ordered descending. You can chain these things together, so hopefully you're getting an idea of how SQL works. And then last one for SQL is join. So this is how you join multiple data sets together, because this is just your GA data, but maybe you want to join your GA and your Facebook data, right? So the way you would do this is you're going to grab everything, and you're going to say from the GA report analytics, join, you're calling that analytics, join this Facebook ad campaign report and call it Facebook, and then this is what you want to join them on. So this is the ID that is common in both sources. So it could be by day, it could be by campaign name, whatever you want. So here we're saying analytics.campaign. So this is UTM campaign, and this is campaign name in Facebook. So if the campaign and the campaign name match, then it's going to join the data together. So it's like kind of a VLOOKUP in spreadsheets. Cool. Now, the final one I'm going to walk you through is Python. So Python is a bit more advanced because SQL is just kind of a query language. It's just for getting data. It's you can actually make changes with SQL as well, but it's kind of crappy and outdated for that. Python is where it's at. So Python, you can do some really complex stuff. A lot of machine learning is in Python, so I definitely recommend you play around with it. Once you get used to it, but the way this works is very similar to JavaScript, right? So they're very similar languages. It's pretty human readable. So you can say, I'm creating a variable here, and this variable is a list, right? So it's item 0, item 1, item 2, right? They're just separated by commas, and these are strings, so they're in quotations. Now, if I wanted to get the item number 1 from the array, that would actually be this middle one here. And the reason why is that encoding arrays always start at 0. So if I wanted, just the first thing, I would say array 0. If I want the last thing, I could actually say array -1, and it's going to count backwards and give me this. Dictionary, so this is similar to the JSON object notation, the JSON that we were talking about before. So you can have like Google is 1,200 or 12,000, Facebook is 6,000, Pinterest is 4,500. And then when you pull from this dictionary, you can say, just give me the value for Google, and it's going to return 12,000. Or you could say, what keys do we have? So this is going to give you, it's going to print out Google, Facebook, Pinterest. Values, it's going to print out 1,200, 6,000, 4,500. Or you could find out the length, so you can say, how many of these rows do you have, for example. Pandas. So Pandas is really cool because it's kind of like Excel, but for Python. And this allows you to create data sets, to look up sessions. So, this is much simpler, I think, than SQL. For example, in SQL, this would be, this would be equivalent to where we said like select sessions from the data and then limit. This is what this is doing. So it's just saying, give me the sessions and limit to the top 10 rows. You can also just say, like, give me the first row, for example. Operators. So if I wanted to count the value, the number of values, I could do that here. If I wanted to filter, I could say source index equals data source equals Google. So a little bit more complicated to get used to, but once you've written it, it's easy. So this is going to give me, just the data frame where Google is the source, right? So similar to the SQL we were doing before. We can do contains, like contain CBC, for example. That's a little bit easier. If Google.com is in landing pages, print homepage present. So you can write some cool scripts here. I'm not going to go too much into Python just because it is a much bigger topic and more complicated, but it's also much more powerful once you learn it. So some ideas for further study. I think it depends on what you're interested in doing. I think the most valuable thing immediately you can learn is just some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because it's going to help you with two things. One is JavaScript tracking, so adding new tracking to GTM, and two is doing Google optimized tests. So being able to kind of code up your own Google optimized tests. Then once you've learned a little bit of that, I would definitely recommend Python. So Code Academy has a Python course. They also have SQL if you want to learn more SQL. But yeah, the Mode Analytics Python course is also really good. And then once you run through these, just ping me, and I have tons and tons of other resources that you can learn from. But hopefully, from this session, you understand now what coding is. Like, it's not scary anymore. Hopefully, it's literally just writing some text that a computer can read. That's all it is. It's not magic. It's a lot of Googling and a lot of copy and pasting and debugging errors. So don't be afraid of it. You can learn it. Literally anyone can learn it. If you've learned to speak English, you can learn how to code. It's another language with its own grammar rules, etc. And it can be complicated to learn. It can be frustrating, but it can make you a much better marketer. So I hope that you have fun learning it. And any questions, please reach out to me. This is one of my personal kind of passions and interests. I've been learning how to code for the past 5 years, and now I spend about 10-15% of my time coding alongside the data science team and helping out with the product team as well. Okay, all right, thanks guys.